I call this meeting of the Finance and Facilities Committee of the Waukesha Board of Education to order. First up is general business, verification of meeting posting.
Yes, it is.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Mr. Clark. Second item on our general business is opportunity for public comment. I don't see anybody that wants to address the committee, so we'll be moving on to our action items. First action item is approval of minutes from January 11th, 2021. Is there any, looking for a motion?
So moved.
Thank you. A second, Mrs. Voigt. Any discussion on the minutes? Anybody? Seeing none. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None. 5-0. Second action item is approval of vouchers. And it looks like we had some questions.
Yes, we did.
Awesome.
First three are on P-card purchases, and the first one was for food under the office of the principal. That was on Kevin Kissler's P-card, and it was for recognition for staff at the holidays, because due to the pandemic, all the holiday celebrations and potlucks, nothing was allowed. So it was a thank you from the principal, and they gave us $20 gift card for the staff. The other one was for equipment purchases, and that was on Jody Landish's P-card for $4,000, and that was for an auto lift for West, purchased from AutoZone, and that was actually paid for with the Carlos Perkins grant funding. It just was paid on her card. The other P-card purchase was for $24,900 to Apple, and this was a payment on a larger purchase, totaling $102,000, and they're for MacBook Airs, and it's part of the normal teacher refresh cycle of MacBook purchases. And I'm just going to keep going unless there's questions, just pop right in. Voucher number 338872. Jensen Equipment Company totaling $37,800. Question was, what is this for? Are we providing sanitizer to private schools? As part of the ESSER funding, the first round of ESSER funding, there's something called equitable participation, where we have to give a portion of our funding belongs to the private schools, but we have to maintain the orders. They can't order on behalf of themselves. We have to make the orders for them and have them shipped to them, and then we pay for the invoices. So yes, this was for for sanitizer and cleaning supplies for a private school, but paid for out of the ESSER funding on there.
Mr. Como.
What does ESSER stand for?
Economic stabilization, something relief. Oh my God, it's part of the CARES
It's
Act.
part of the CARES. Okay,
Sorry.
okay. I just wasn't familiar with that.
Yes, sir.
ESSER.
I wasn't familiar with that part.
Yes, it's part of the original CARES Act. We received this funding, and then we now have a second round of it, which we'll be discussing later in another agenda topic.
Okay, thank you.
Second round doesn't have the equitable participation for private schools like the first one
Thank you.
did. Okay. On the backside is a question on voucher 339089 for WCTC for $125,340. And the question was how many students are taking advantage of the program. They've heard and read about Nicole Cheesman, a North student who will receive her WCTC degree before her high school graduation. And the question was how many others were enrolled. We basically have three different dual enrollment type programs. We have the Dual Enrollment Academy with WCTC, which is what this bill was for. Then there's the state program called Start College Now, and then there's the Early College Credit Program. And the program that we have with WCTC is mirrored off of the Start College Now. It's just a private arrangement that we have with them to provide these services. And this particular bill covers 33 students from North, 6 students from South, and 4 students from West. And it allows students that have finished the 10th grade and are in good economic standing to be able to take college credits and get earn college credits toward their degree. And some of these credits, most of them, they get credit for high school and credit for college at the same time while they're taking the course. And so though the Start College Now and the Dual Enrollment Academy are very similar, the other program, Early College Credit Program, is credits for four-year colleges. And that one we do have reimbursement from the state. They try to reimburse at 50% if the student didn't get high school credits with it. If they got high school credits with it, the reimbursement drops to 25%, but it's a some certain pool of money, so if the claims exceed the ability to pay everybody, everybody's prorated. Unfortunately, the person, our resident expert in the district is on vacation this week, and so I was unable to get counts for the other two programs, but I can give that to Darren for a Friday update, like in 2 weeks.
Montiel?
Yeah, I don't know if you know the answer, maybe who could find out, but there's 33 at North, 6 at South, and 4 at West. Do we have any idea why there's such a difference in numbers?
You know, I was going off the invoice, so I couldn't clarify with Stacy if that 33 is one student who's taken multiple credits or 33 different students. I don't know if the student, Brian, do you know what school is enrollment? Oh, North. She's a North student, so I'm guessing that's what that is that they count.
Might have bent the curve a
student.
little bit on the
So,
conversation.
yeah, she definitely bent the curve on the number of credits that she took. So I'm guessing the invoice is listing students but not unique students. So it's like per class. There was a student in this class, a student in this class, was probably the same student. So that probably reads wrong to say 33 students.
If the person, I'm sorry,
Oh, no, go ahead.
the person that's gone, is there a way they can just confirm that, or?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I can confirm that with Stacy and find out the number of actual students at North participating in the program versus the number of classes taken.
Thank you.
Not a problem.
Sherry, do you think that includes the students that we have for the welding degree as well? Because we send quite a few students over for that as well. It's on. Oh, because I know that we have that co-op program where they get credit on the welding from North. And I think that program is only at North, right?
Sure.
I think so. So that might be included in there. That just might be all the students that we're sending to CTC. Because I know quite a few doing that. Diane?
Yeah, and I was wondering, I used to teach
Yeah.
accounting.
Yeah.
And all the students in my accounting class at North High School were also getting credit at WCTC.
Right.
And that's why I was just wondering, do we pay like this type of a tuition for each of those kids for getting those credits?
I believe so.
So that the reason for my questioning it.
Yeah.
Because I'd have 30 kids in my
Yeah.
class.
Yeah, oh, for
you
sure.
know,
We send.
would all be eligible.
Yeah, there's a lot of students that go over from North. I don't think that number is probably incorrect. It's closer too.
I'll follow up on the number of students versus classes, and then just include the welding program.
Yep.
And the numbers enrolled in the other programs, and I'll get that to Darren after this for Friday with the phone.
Excellent. Thank you, Sherry. Any other questions on that voucher? Okay. Any other questions on the vouchers period that might have come up? Anybody? Okay, I'll be looking for a motion for approval.
So moved.
Reinacek, and a second. Ms. Voigt, thank you very much. Any other discussion on the item? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? 5-0. That concludes our action items. Moving on to discussion information items. First up is long-term debt review.
Yeah, we have Michelle Weiberg from PMA's phoning in or webbing in or whatever the verb is to go over. We had a question asked, or I had a question posed to me about refinancing some of our debt because interest rates are extremely low. So I thought it'd be good just to have Michelle come in and walk us through our options because it's not as straightforward as you might think. And then, we can talk a little bit about what our approach has been with the large defeasances, which is prepayment of debt versus interest savings versus a longer schedule, but you'd have lower taxation. And, we've talked about that as an annual decision. And I think it will continue to be that, but I thought I'd bring in the expert to kind of guide us through the base of the conversation. So, Michelle, if you want to go through.
Sure.
In her handout, she references is in board docs, and I'll bring it up on the screen too, just so.
Yeah, do you want me to share it, Darren, or are you sharing it?
I'll share it.
Okay, great. So, right, this was in your packet, and what I wanted to do was just in the very top of this, just give you an idea of the existing debt that is outstanding. So there's really two debt issues that were done in relation to the successful referendum. And we did general obligation promissory notes, series 2019, calendar year 2019. And then we did another note issue in calendar year 2020. These were two different types of debt offerings. The 2019 notes were done as a traditional municipal market issue. And with that type of debt issuance, the entire issue is not prepayable at any time. So for that particular debt issuance, it's just the last three maturities that are prepayable. The 2027, 28, and 29 maturities are eligible for prepayment in 2026. Given new tax reform, we're not able to refinance that debt at tax-exempt rates. We can only refinance that debt at taxable interest rates up until the call date. At that time, we can refinance at tax-exempt rates. But I listed here so you kind of understand that that issue is outstanding. Borrowed $45 million in connection with that issue. You have outstanding after you make your April 1, 2021 debt payment. You will have $32,955,000 outstanding. The all-inclusive interest rate on that issue was 2.08. Again, the final maturity is 2029, and there's three maturities eligible to refinance, but again, not until the call date can we actually refinance that at tax-exempt rates. So our focus really turned towards the second debt issue that was done in 2020, which was done as a bank financing. And those of you that were on the board at the time will probably recall our strategy there was to do a portion of the referendum financing as a bank financing so that it would be prepayable at time. And we did that because we felt as though the district may have an opportunity to manage the overall levy and tax rate and still come within the referendum targets and be able to actually prepay this issue. And you've already done just that, which I'll get into in just a moment. But that original amount borrowed was $15 million. The amount outstanding after the April 1 payment will be $5,235,000. The all-inclusive rate on that issue was 2.17%. The original final maturity was 2029, but you've already shortened that issue by 2 years because of prepayments. So we really only have what is remaining outstanding after the April 1 payment that is eligible to refinance or prepay. As of April 1, 21, overall, the district will have already repaid 36% of the referendum debt, with 64% of it outstanding. And you've done that by really pushing up principal. So in 2020, you had a very large principal payment that you made immediately actually after issuing the bank loan because you had debt service dollars available to do so. You made a principal payment on that bank loan of $4,615,000. By accelerating that principal payment, you saved $713,000 of interest cost. In 2021, on April 1 of 21, you will prepay $5,150,000 of that bank loan. In doing so, you will save $810,000 of interest cost. So we have kind of past, present, and then future. If you were to be able to have a debt levy that is similar to what you had in 21 for 2022, again, by managing your overall levy and tax rate, you would maybe perhaps be able to prepay about $5 million of principal a year from now, saving an additional $465,000 of interest cost. So with transactions that are completed or nearly completed, you will have saved over $1.5 million of interest cost via acceleration of principal and prepayment of principal. If we look forward 1 year, you could perhaps have essentially this bank loan almost paid in full if you were able to set a limit that was approximately equal to what you did this year. So we lay this out to illustrate to you how much you've already accomplished and what can be accomplished even with just one more prepayment, kind of a separate conversation from any refinancing opportunities. So as we look to refinancing options of the bank loan, again, you can just leave that outstanding if you'd like at the current interest rate, and you could perhaps paid in full a year from now, or there's a few different scenarios that we've laid out for you to refinance it at current lower interest rate. So again, from the top, we have the amount that is eligible to refinance as $5,235,000. And we did 3 different scenarios. We did one scenario where we don't extend final maturity. So again, the original final maturity of this bank loan was 2029. You've already cut off the last 2 years of it. So the current final maturity is 2027. We then ran a scenario that extends the final maturity back out to 2029, and then a third scenario that extends the final maturity out to 2031. To the extent that you do not extend the maturity, you have more savings. So under scenario 1, we show you the current interest rate again was 2.17%. The new rate estimated that could be maybe accomplished via refinancing is 0.93% for total present value savings of nearly $313,000. That's net of cost of issuance. Scenario 2, savings of approximately $281,000, and scenario 3, savings of approximately $232,000. So I think what this illustrates to us is that you certainly could refinance at lower rates. Another strategy would be to just leave the debt alone and look to potentially prepaying debt again in the future. The reduction in interest cost could be very significant, even more so than what you would realize with a refinancing if you were able to actually prepay that debt a year from now, as you've done, again, both in 2020 and you're about to do in 2021. So with that, I will be quiet and see if there are any questions.
I'm not sure if I'm asking this right, but what is the cost of issuance or reissuance?
Yeah, the cost of issuance are probably going to be between 1% and 2% of what you're refinancing. So that's going to be somewhere around the neighborhood of maybe $50,000 when we look at legal costs, potential rating costs, and documentation, financial advisor costs as well. What I would look to do is if you were interested in refinancing, try to minimize those costs as much as we can and potentially look at another bank financing. So that would mean no rating would be necessary. You would really just probably have a financial advisory fee and a bond counsel fee associated with that. That I think would be the best route to go to try to maintain prepayment flexibility as well. So if we were to refinance that debt and go and do a capital markets issue as we did for your 2019 series, we'd come up against the same problem that we have with that issue, and that is it's not prepayable at any time. So I would look to do, if you are interested in a refinancing, look to do that as a bank financing if at all possible, assuming those rates are, attractive on an all-inclusive basis against what we can do in the market to maintain prepayment flexibility and minimize costs.
Mr. Montiel?
Thank you. Obviously, we're paying back taxpayers' dollars. Do you have a recommendation?
I feel as though if you think it's reasonable that you will prepay this debt issue, that you may want to leave it alone. But I'm not against us kind of traveling down a road to see what we can do in terms of a bank financing. So I realize that doesn't answer your question. That says we could do either one. But, maybe, if you were to do a refinancing at this time, and then just go ahead and prepay that new refinancing next year. The savings associated with just 1 year of lower interest rates could be almost $50,000. So you would have some value to going through the exercise of refinancing today, even if you prepay the whole thing next year. So I certainly think it is something to kind of pause and think about. But again, I would really only recommend it as a new bank financing, not as a capital markets issue.
Como?
Thank you, Pat. Yeah, I think my hope is we can stay the course and hopefully continue to prepay. And, Darren, you probably brought this up, first of all, because we can, we are heading into some times where we're really not sure. I think heading into next year, we're looking at having a few question marks. Just probably over the next 2 or 3 years, balancing our budget is just a little bit more difficult due to COVID. Darren, I guess you're the one with the best crystal ball with respect to, do you think we can stay the course and continue to do prepayments as we have been?
Yeah, I have some concern with our operational levy for next year because state aid and your shared costs, meaning how much have you spent per student essentially. Some school, we all did something different this year in terms of spending. Every district's a little different. I would think we all probably operated within a range, so I have a little concern for next year based off of our projections, but then it rectifies itself in our projections. So I think maybe it won't be as consistent as the first 2 years have been, but I think we still can defease at some level and pay down this debt and continue to pay it down quickly. But a lot of things have changed since we started this process too. We went from one of the greatest economies to a completely shut down economy over a 2-year period. So we have to monitor our community. What's the taxation like? But I think there's room to continue that because our tax, if you use rate as your measure, is very low in comparison to the other districts in Waukesha County. Now, most people measure taxes by the bill they get in December, regardless of what all the other numbers are that are out there that guys like me talk about. So I think we can. I think we can take advantage of it. Michelle and I talked earlier today, and I think it's worth investigating a new bank loan. I wouldn't touch, I would agree with Michelle, I wouldn't take away our flexibility. This whole thing was built around flexibility. And see if it is worth 1 year of interest savings. If we can score $50,000 to $75,000, I don't know what the numbers are. But if it's going to go into the bond issuance side of it, I think your savings will get chewed up and you'll lose flexibility.
So just continuing down that line, what kind of time frame would we be looking at to make a decision on this if we wanted to go forward with the?
We could really refinance whenever we wanted, right, Michelle? It would just, the longer you take, the less interest savings you're going to garner would be the.
Exactly.
We would move on it rather quickly, I think.
Right. Yeah, and again, we could go back to just the lender that has this loan outstanding and just start the conversation there and kind of cross-reference that against what we're seeing elsewhere. And maybe it's as simple as that, in terms of how we get this accomplished. But I agree, every month that goes by, if you're going to go that route, I would probably say let's go for it, because every month of interest savings, if you're going to end up just prepaying it a year from now, I would want to see you have real value. And that would mean more months of interest savings, the better. So
yeah, I would envision us next month it being agendized if we're going to, if we deem it worthy of our time.
And that's why I asked you, Darren, what do you think the feasibility of this is, and I heard you say we probably could, is what I heard you say. Okay. With pretty good confidence. Not just maybe, but we could pursue this.
With a fair level of confidence,
Okay.
yeah.
Appreciate that.
Other questions? Ms. Reincheck?
Thank you. And I know we talked a lot about numbers, but as far as time, how much time does this take out from your day or yours, Sherry? Like as far as, us paying you to have meetings or taking time out away from other things that you would be doing?
With a bank loan, there's really not, Michelle's office handles the vast majority of the work. The bond issues, it gets a little more, you get into the legal documents and all the gathering of data, but if it's a loan for loan, it's certainly worth doing at some price point. And it wouldn't be an undue burden on us. It's part of what we do anyway, so. And we're both salaried, so all the time in the world. 24 hours a day, right? But no, it's very doable. Loan to loan's very, very simple.
Anything else? All right. Thanks much.
Thanks, Michelle.
Thank you. Take care.
Have a great night. All righty.
Okay, and
Next up on our discussion information docket is the prescription drug plan.
yeah, we have, Jeff is WebExing with us, and then Justin and Jean are here from HNI, and then Kay Oldenburg, our benefits coordinator for the district, is here to talk about an idea we have related to the cost of prescription drugs. So this is a concept at this point. It's something we have been looking into for several weeks now, I think going back to maybe Thanksgiving time or so. But the dollars involved, and it's kind of a new area of, honestly say I hadn't thought about this much before this, but prescription drugs is it's not a new topic in terms of it being a cost driver, but this area of prescription drugs that we're going to talk about is really a cost driver now, unlike, you used to talk about brand names versus generic, and that was the big topic, and you went round and round about that. This is a different cost factor times 10 or 100. So one thing I'll just say on the front end of this is the savings are, once we get to it, because the presentation has some background information, the people who are impacted in terms of our employees is a very small number. So don't think as we start talking about these concepts that it's going to be everyone who's under our policy is going to be impacted by this, because it's the exact opposite of that. So Jeff, I have the PowerPoint. I don't know who's kicking off.
I'm going to kick off.
You want to kick off, Jeff, and then we can answer questions. You're on mute, Jeff. Nope.
No.
Still can't hear you.
No.
This is the last time, too.
No, we still can't hear you, Jeff.
Hear me now?
Hey, there you are.
Okay. Sounds great. Well, good evening, everybody. I'm going to kick this off. I'm going to give a very high-level overview. And Darren's got the PowerPoint there, but before I kick it to Jean and Justin, who have some technical expertise on this subject that they want to share with you, just thought I'd give you a broad macro overview of what we've observed over the last number of years within the district, and then with sort of with the overall prescription drug and healthcare industry. So on a high level, what we observe across the country is not an increase in healthcare costs because people are using more medical services. We observe an increase in cost because of the price of those services, and then also the rising costs of a certain segment of prescription drugs called the specialty drug area. Now, if I were to ask you 10 years ago to name a drug that might have cost $1,000 a month, any of us would be very hard pressed to do that. But today, those drugs are plenty. And what's happened is instead of creating expensive drugs for the masses, drug manufacturers have now created super expensive drugs for very small numbers of people. So as Darren had indicated, the concept that we're going to talk about tonight generally affects about 1% to 2% of a group's population, but can really, really impact costs and not adversely affect them. So you might remember a number of years ago, we changed our pharmacy benefit manager from Optum to Navitus because they provided a transparent, fully disclosed model where they pass through all the revenue and all the expenses. We're not suggesting we change that whatsoever. What we're going to be talking about is a different way of financing a certain segment of your prescription drugs. So that's what we're talking about, and I'll just run through this pretty quickly so that you can get to the meat of it in your questions. So, Darren, I can't see your screen, so I'm just going to roll with the fact that you're maybe on number 2 now. Yep. Different district roughly spends. That one?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yes.
So we probably should have had this in question and answer format, but the reality is of our $22 million healthcare spend, prescription drugs push almost 4 million of that. And that trend continues to increase. Darren, if you would like to change to the next one. We're not going to dive into this actuarial chart, but if you just observe the plotted line from the January of 2018 through the rest of that graph, you can see the plotted line is on a steady incline. If you're really interested in what that looks like, you can look at the numbers down below that show the per member, per month cost increasing from $78 to north of $100, or over a 30% increase over that period of time. Again, this is due to increased utilization of very high-cost drugs. And by no means are we saying employees should be taking these drugs. These drugs are very valuable, but one of the things that you call us to do and our clients ask us to do are find innovative ways to make sure our employees are taken care of, but yet try to moderate some of these cost increases, and that's what this concept will do. So the next frame just speaks to the fact that this is a runaway freight train that's not going to stop. And by the year end 2027, if nothing changes, we are talking about a drug spend somewhere between $4.5 and almost $6 million a year with a steady state headcount. Obviously, very unaffordable. The next frame speaks to one of these drugs that I'm just going to run through some of these numbers. So there is a very popular drug out there. It's been around for a while. It's called Humira. It treats rheumatoid arthritis. It has a companion drug by the name of Enbrel. It does the same thing. This drug, the annual sales, domestic sales, is just shy of $15 billion. The gross top line revenue worldwide is about $20 billion. The company that makes this drug, AbbVie, spends $556 million a year on advertising. And the cost of the drug has risen from 2006, from $16,000 per person per year to now $65,000 per person per year. to a projected cost of 2025 of $145,000 per person year. What difference does that make to the school district of Waukesha? Here's why this is so important. Drug manufacturers do a lot of advertising. I'm sure you've seen them all over TV, all over the radio, all over print media, all over Google Ads, everything else. And typically at the end of every advertisement, after the people dance through the lily fields or holding hands on the end of the dock and they tell us all about the side effects, there's a very either small print or a voice that says, ask your doctor or pharmacist if you qualify for a lower cost, or you might be able to get this drug at a $5 copay, even though it's $65,000 a year. What happens is this: the drug manufacturers have set aside dollars to pay for these drugs through what we call patient assistance programs or copay programs, copay card programs. And they are actually willing to finance and pay for these drugs for a certain segment of the US population. It's happening right now under your plan. The only difference is they're paying a portion and the district is picking up the difference. What we're going to talk about tonight is the notion that as long as they're willing to pay for these drugs, maybe it's not a bad idea that we formalize this. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Justin and Jean and look forward to your questions and interaction. We think this could be a huge reset for the district from a financial standpoint. And we also believe that the impact on your employee group is very negligible. We are not suggesting anything but they get the drugs they need when they need it, just someone else paying for it. So with that, I'll turn it over to the rest of my team and try to successfully put myself on mute.
I think that was a good overview that Jeff had here. And I think that was a good overview that Jeff had here in terms of setting up the problem. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this next section, but you know, one of the thought processes here is that, of course, that our pharmacy drug supply chain is doing something to help us in this arena, because obviously this is unsustainable. But if you flip to the next slide, these are their stock prices over the course of the last 15 years. They're not doing anything to help us. They're not giving us any favors here. And if you look, Optum, there's the third one down. We made that move from Navitus a number of years ago to a fully transparent PBM, and that got us off of this train to some degree. We're going to talk about doing that a little bit more today. Flip again, the supply chain of prescription drugs, it's not, there are a lot of middlemen in this process. And with every middleman, the cost increases, right? That's with anything, but everybody's taking a cut. And so what we're going to do today is try to get right to the manufacturer and capture the dollars and skip a whole segment of that middle section of the supply chain. So what are the challenges here? Jeff mentioned this. We've got less than 2% on average account for 50% of your prescription plan spend. Now, we're going to find here in a couple slides that 1% of the Waukesha school population is spending about 68% of all of our prescription spend. And so that's the highest we've in fact seen. The specialty drug increase has been over 100% the last 5 years. Some of these non-specialty drugs, the cost increase is almost overnight for some of these. We've got an employee challenge though, right? Because every time we take an increase, we're looking at deductibles, we're looking at HSA contribution differentials, we're looking at creative ways to solve for it. And the reality is employees and members need these prescriptions. So if you flip the slide, where does the district stand on this? This is how the numbers break down. You can see I've got circled there, 1% of our scripts account for 68% of our costs. So we're talking about 461 prescriptions, actual scripts written, that make up, this entire segment. It's $2.6 million in costs. So when Jeff said on the front end, or when Darren said on the front end, there's very little impact from a member's standpoint for what the cost benefit is, and that's really what we're talking about. Is 400 and some scripts. So we obviously have a need for a specialty solution, and employees need these drugs. And health plans can't continue to sustain these increases. We've seen this, year over year with no slowing. And it's only going to get worse. Now, I'm not going to go through each one of these, but other than the bottom point, manufacturers are happy to provide a portion of this at low cost or no cost. And some of our employees are taking advantage of that today. So what have we done already? The move to Navitus, a fully transparent PBM a few years ago, was a very important move. What that did was align the PBM with our motives and sort of removed them as part of the problem in the supply chain. We had the copay max put in last year, which gets to the copay portion of this that we're going to talk about in a little bit to some degree. This is going to push it a lot farther. What the copay max program did was really drive at getting the copay card a little bit further in the process, but the real dollars are going to come on the other side of it, which is the patient assistance program. The program we're talking about today is new with Navitus for 2021. And so we would have been looking at this last year if Navitus had offered it. For 2021, they're instituting this for the rest of their plans. So we've got a solution here where most members that are on these high-cost prescription drugs are going to get them for no cost or very, very low cost. Where today, they're paying up to their out-of-pocket maximum typically in a year to get access to these prescriptions. So it's not only lucrative from a plan standpoint, a cost plan standpoint, but also to the membership. So we've got two different types of assistance, the copay cards, which we're doing today through Copay Max, and then the patient assistance programs. And the patient assistance programs really run dollars. But Jeff had referenced the, on the website or at the end of a commercial, this little statement that you'll see. This is right off of AbbVie's website. Maybe you guys can read that, but it says, we believe people who need our medications should be able to get them. That's why My AbbVie Assist provides free AbbVie medicine to qualifying patients. So it's right out there on their website in terms of what they're willing to do. And so now what we're going to try to do through the Navitus program is capture as much of that as we possibly can. So I'm going to let Jean talk through how this process actually works and how we get to either the patient assistance programs or the copay cards.
Right. So the whole program, we want to make sure everybody understands that we're focusing on a small group of people, because most people go and have their prescriptions through the retail pharmacy, or they've got themselves set up for mail order. And we're going to look at all of those drugs, and 98% of those medications, 99% actually, are going to continue to flow through like they always have, which is important. That means that a very small amount of people are going to have to do something different. Everybody else is not going to see any changes. However, there's going to be some drugs, these specialty drugs, that are going to have to go through a new process. And everyone is going to need to go through that process in order to determine if there is a patient assistance program available, if they qualify, because there are certain qualifications for those, and possibly copay card as a last resort, because we want to get that whole cost of that medication off the plan. And there's certain things that we need to do in order to determine if someone qualifies. So patient assistance programs are based on need. And we're going to have our plan set up as such that members will have to go through, I'm calling it a process, if they want their medications through the district. And the process is to work with the current specialty pharmacy, Lumicera. You may not recognize that name, but anybody in the district who gets a medication, specialty medication, is going through Lumicera. They will continue to talk through Lumicera, and Lumicera is going to work on paperwork for them. To qualify, you must show a tax return. There is no ifs, ands, or buts, because it's based on need. And that tax return is going to determine, based on each pharmaceutical company and each different specialty medication, if that person qualifies, based on a single family, 2 kids, 4 kids, whatever it might be. So that information is going to go to Lumicera and the pharmaceutical company to determine that need. No cost to the member if they're approved. If they are not, if they are over income, so why wouldn't they get approved? They're over income. We can't do anything about that, and we know that. There's a certain amount of people who will be a higher income. We're going to look to see if that copay card is available. If there's some way to get some of those dollars again off of the district plan through that copay card. And if there isn't one, then we'll put it back on the plan like it had been before. No, it would be a no loss, no gain. I'll pause for a second.
Yeah, this is really the catch. I mean, the change. This is all about process, as Jean
All
mentioned.
about process.
It's the employee giving the tax return because you measure wealth off of that, right? Or the acquisition of wealth. So that's the big change that an employee will see. What's the average income threshold,
Yeah.
just so you give you an idea of, maybe
Just
you're covering
a
that later.
rule of thumb, about 70,000 for a single person, about 170 for a family of 4. And none of us here are going to make a determination on whether anybody is over income or not. I don't care if we know you're over income or not. Everybody has to go through that process funnel. So we can keep everyone in here, everyone with the district, and us as well, out of the mix of knowing whether someone's qualifying or not. They're going to get their drug. It's a matter of the process working the way it's supposed to and getting them the drug one way or the other. So that's why we'll talk about how they're going to get notified and how these members will know that they need to be part of this program. But I would say there's no exceptions to the process. So what are we talking about? Well, if you look at the list of drugs, you may or may not recognize these drugs. Yes.
Real quick, who administers that then? Is that your group?
Lumicera.
Okay, so
that's why we stay
the whole
out of
process
it.
goes through them.
Right.
That's who we're
They're going to do all the paperwork for the member. They're going to collect that information. They're going to submit all the paperwork to the pharmaceutical company on the member's behalf, let them know that it's set up, make sure that medication is sent to their home.
And you said that in the beginning. I needed clarification on that, just
Sure.
to make sure everything was going.
And that's why we're going to be using the same systems we already have in place. We're just going to make them work a little different. So the same Lumicera that your members are already used to using, that's who they're going to call, and that's who they're already calling them now. So they're the ones that are going to help them out.
Right, and so essentially that tax information, that data is not available to our employees here, to anybody in administration, to the president of the school board, or
Nope.
anybody.
No one.
Okay.
No one at all.
Clear on that.
HIPAA still applies here, so it's still protecting that level of information and that medication for that person.
Okay.
And in the beginning, we talked about a small population. It's 41 people right now. So we're not asking the entire population to provide financial documentation to Lumicera.
Out of almost 3,400.
Yeah.
Sure.
Let's give it some context. Yeah,
Is this cancer medication?
it
I
could
know
be.
it's-
Sure.
It can be.
We want to make sure, and that's the other thing too. So let me, I think I'm going to be addressing that in a minute, but
I'm sorry.
no, it's okay. Even if someone needed it now, they're going to get it now, and we're going to work through the paperwork process.
When you say
So they-
work through the paperwork process,
Sure.
That's
If a
covered by
doctor
Lumira?
prescribed you a medication right now for cancer, we're not going to say, I'm sorry, but you need to wait 2 to 4 weeks so we can get the paperwork going. You know, if this is a life-threatening drug, we're going to make sure that we get you that fill and get you started on that paperwork so that following fill, we can get it, you know, off the plan and through the patient assistance if appropriate.
I'm not trying to parse your words, but you said if it's a life-threatening drug, is that just those that are going to not stop, or is it all current prescriptions for that population? They're going to maintain their prescriptions until they apply through Lumira, and they'll keep those prescriptions until they're either approved or not approved?
I think I'm going to rephrase if you don't mind.
I just want to see if there's a gap.
So, if there's a what?
A gap.
A gap. We're going to try to make sure there isn't a gap for getting their medication.
What does that mean? Try to make sure.
So 2 months ahead of time, before we go live, whenever the agreed upon date is that we go live, if it's September 1st with the renewal, 60 days ahead of that time, we're going to start reaching out to these 41 people or whatever the number is. And we're going to start not only ahead before that, we're going to have open enrollment meetings. We're going to tell everybody what's going on and that it probably isn't going to affect you because it's a small group of people, but you're going to get reached out to if you are in this group, you're going to get a letter. There's going to be follow-ups from Lumicera if you choose to ignore it, because at some point we're going to have to say, look, you have to do this. We're not going to keep giving you fill after fill after fill, okay? We're going to give them lots and lots of time before the effective date and after the effective date.
How much time? Do you know?
Well, I think we're going to set what that is. We need to set parameters. So we have not done that.
I'm not saying this is, I'm sorry, can I ask another question? I'm not saying this is a good idea or a bad idea. I'm just, the way I think is worst case scenario, best case scenario. If someone is a cancer patient and they're suffering and they're not in school or, you know, they can't work and they're a single parent or a single individual, how are they going to do this paperwork?
They're not. So Lumicera is going to reach out to them and say, I need your tax returns. And when you and they may need who your doctor is so they can reach out to your doctor. They may need to have a release form signed so they can talk to the doctor. It just depends what the situation is. And once they collect that, they're filling out all the paperwork for the pharmaceutical company, setting up the prescription pipeline, right? So they have the prescription, get it to the pharmaceutical company, so they know to send you what specific drug every month.
So if, hypothetically speaking, if one of our employees is non-responsive because they're too sick and they have no support, are they just going to lose their prescription?
No. I think we will be certainly smart about that. I don't think we've worked on groups already working on things like this. It's not someone who is too sick. It's someone who is resistant to change. Those are the ones that tend to not reply, not return a phone call, not call in. And it's just a lot of education. Kay and I and Justin and I have talked about how we do this communication strategy ahead of time, because we know that it's some change in general is difficult for some people. And the tax return thing is going to be another issue.
I think I'll add to that, if you don't mind.
There's some more for it?
You know, I think if,
Yes. Go ahead.
I'm sorry, just one final question, I think. I think I just lost it.
sorry about that.
No. It'll come back, hopefully, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Yeah, I was just going to add, you know, if you think about a single parent in this situation today, you know, what we're going to hopefully be able to do is get them their drug for free, where they're not going to be getting their out-of-pocket taxes.
Right.
So if we can have a relief valve for them, you know, we think that's a pretty good thing to be able to offer that to them. Is there more paperwork? Potentially, because they've got to do the tax return, right? But today they're interfacing with mail order, they're interfacing with Lucera today for those drugs. I think the tax return is the more important part.
I think so.
I had one more point, but I can't remember what it is.
You're up for it.
Thank you. Is this something unique that you guys created, or is?
Oh, no.
Okay.
No.
Do you know other districts that have tried this, or other companies that have tried this?
So first of all, with Navitus, Navitus developed this program and started it as of January 1st for some of their groups because this was already out in the market from other third parties.
Okay.
Okay, they could lose their business if they didn't come up with a solution. So this was their solution to work within the system that they already have with Lumicera. Having said that, there are other third parties out there, which we did investigate, but it would require more disruption within the district, that we are working with two other school districts right now with that type of program. Similar tax return, because it's all based on patient assistance. So yes, Justin and I are working on 2 of those right now.
And those are completed with those districts, or is that?
As of January 1st, they changed their PBM and moved to a third party.
Do you know any other organization that has done this and it's been going on for years, so we could just check with them and see how it's going?
And outside of Wisconsin, yes. But again, I think, let me back up. Navitus doesn't have any for you.
Okay.
Because this is so new for them as of January 1st.
But the drug companies' programs are the same.
Those programs have been around for many years.
Okay.
Yeah, these programs have been around for a long time. There have been third-party organizations that have gone after this patient assistance program in a very similar model. This is the first that I know of. I'm sure that there are other PBMs out there like Navitus that have stepped in and said, hey, we're going to do this on behalf of our members and be sort of a one-stop. Generally, you've got an advocacy firm separate from the PBM that's sort of tacking on and managing this program. And that's what the other clients that we have are doing. This is the first one that Navitus is doing is all in-house and making it a little bit more seamless than maybe some of the other firms have done across the country.
Yes.
Thank
That
you.
help?
It
Okay.
did, thank you.
So how often does the patient have to apply?
Well, there would be a renewal, so every tax year, you're going to make sure that you still qualify
Okay.
through their income threshold.
So every year you're going to have to file your
You would have to
return.
provide it to
Yep.
Lumicera, and at that point, most of that paperwork is done, but you would have to provide it to Lumicera so they could just re-up it.
Okay. And I know that these programs have been around forever. Is it that they're just managing it for them? Because you can do this on your own, can't you?
Well, you could try, but
Yep.
you have a very generous health plan.
Okay.
So based on how good your health plan is, they have the ability to say, I'm sorry,
Right.
you don't qualify because you've got such a rich health plan. Now, one of the things that we have to do with our plan is set it up as such that we're not going to exclude specialty from our plan. We're not doing that. We are saying that in order to get the benefit, to get that medication, you have to go through this process.
Right.
And the reason why we do that is because, and I'm getting in the weeds, so I apologize, but if the drug has to come back on the plan, we want to make sure that our stop-loss coverage protects the district.
Okay.
So that's why we do not exclude it.
So how are we getting around the generous plan that we have?
Well, that's by the plan design being, or the plan document being vague about how specialty is covered.
Okay.
So rather than saying specialty is covered at your deductible and coinsurance like it is now, it will say, in order to get your specialty medication, call Lumicera at this number.
Okay.
See, today what happens, and this is sort of plan language,
Yep.
in the weeds, right?
Yeah.
But today, if you were to honor plan, the way the language is, you'd reach out to the drug manufacturer and they say, well, hey, you've got coverage
Yep.
for this. You're not eligible.
You're not eligible.
Okay.
And today, or under this new program, they would say, well, you're not eligible
Okay.
for coverage under this plan in the way that the plan design language is written. Therefore, we'll allow the dollars, the patient assistance dollars to be released. And if they don't qualify, then they come back on the plan and we move forward as we always have. So it's a flip in the plan language in terms of how we access these dollars.
Okay.
That's probably the easiest way to.
Yeah, no, that's a great way to describe it. So that flip in the language, is that just for 41 of our employees?
Well, keep in mind, we never know how many of
Oh, yeah,
your
right. It could
people
be
are going
81
to.
next year.
But just to give you some comfort, I asked, the 41 is fairly stable. I asked for the last several years. It's been
Yeah, we did. We took a look at
38
the
to
last-
42
Yeah,
people,
right.
so it's not like it's 200 one year and
Right.
Yeah, no, for
zero
sure.
the next. So.
But I'm just wondering, the language in their health plan will change, and the rest.
The
other-
plan document as a whole for everyone
So
who's
it
on
is,
the
okay.
district plan will look like that.
Okay.
And again, this is, and I think when we go through this a little bit, this is also not only trying to protect the district now, but you saw in the beginning that there's a lot of other drugs out in the market. The pipeline is full for drugs coming out that are just going to be a significant cost, and we want to make sure that this is protecting you in the future, not just right now.
How many drugs are on the specialty list?
A specialty in general?
Yeah, I mean, how many drugs are we going
I
to be pushing towards to?
Right now, we
Yeah.
gave the list up here. This is the ones we know your people are using
Okay.
right now, but that list, that's just a small list of a potential,
Right, that's what we're using, but that's not the whole list of specialty
no,
drugs.
not the whole list.
Because like, I know Humira, you're on it forever. You don't get off it.
Unless it no longer works for you.
Right.
Then
Yeah,
there's
unless
that
you have to
next drug on the
switch.
pipeline.
Right, and you, are immune, but there's no cure for rheumatoid arthritis.
No.
Or
You're
plaque
gonna be on
psoriasis.
something.
Okay. Excellent.
Yes. Sorry.
Mr. Montiel.
Sorry, I know I said last question, but I think I lied. The two questions I know I'm going to get is, does this disproportionately affect a certain demographic, breast cancer,
No.
something like that?
No.
How do you know that if we don't know what prescriptions are on that list?
Well, if you wanted to see the list of all specialty medications from Lumicera, we could get that for you.
I'd be
But it
more
covers more than just cancer. I mean, it's going to cover the rheumatoid arthritis, the MS, cystic fibrosis, hemophilia, any other rare blood disorder that could be out there. There are actually some costly diabetic medications that are on there that are not just for someone who's on the regular insulin. This is someone who really is uncontrolled. So it's a variety of
Okay,
conditions.
fair enough. Second
as-
question I
oh, go
know
ahead.
I'm going to get is
Yeah.
the process. I know you talked about submitting tax
Yeah.
returns. Has Navitas told you exactly what the process is and what the time frame is? From time of application to time of decision?
So
I
it can,
think people are going to ask us, what are we getting into?
yeah, and that's what we're going to have all laid out for the members when we do the open enrollment meetings. But we have a sample copy of the letter, so we know what's going to go out. But the timeline, we're going to set the timeline. We can't get this started too quickly. Someone might think they're going to be set up to get their drug before whatever the effective date is. So we've got a timeline that will work back from the effective date. We're assuming right now that it's September 1st. From that, the time frame to get it through can be 2 to 4 weeks on a normal process to work with a pharmaceutical company. That's assuming that the members, like Johnny on the spot, to get their information back timely. The longer the member takes, then the longer that process. But it's generally, it can be as little as 2 weeks. It's generally not going to be more than 4.
We don't know at this time specifically what they're going to have to do as far as the patient or our employees' involvement.
The patient's going to need to either call into Lumicera,
Yep.
or if for some reason Lumicera reaches out to them for their normal medication refill, they can start the process and discussion then. But typically, they're going to get the letter to start with. The letter's going to say that they need to call into Lumicera. When we do our open enrollment meetings, if they recognize that they're taking a specialty medication, which they should because they'd be getting it from Lumicera, they can reach out ahead of time and start the process that way. What we want to work on, and this is something that the three of us are going to talk about, is what do we do when people are not responding? They're ignoring the letter. So we need to work through what our process is and what we want Lumicera to do after that and the timing that we want them to do it, so we can make sure that we're not on September 1st and someone says, I need my medication. They're going to get their medication. We're going to give them that gap fill. If it needs to be 1 month gap fill, great. If it's got to be 2 months, fine, but we still want to get them going in that process while we give them that gap fill.
Look, I'm sorry, I probably didn't state this correctly, but is the process for each one of our employees going to be the same through Navitas, regardless of the prescription? And if it is,
Yeah.
what exactly is that process? And if we don't know yet, that's fine. When will we know? Because if we're going to have to vote on this, I need to know exactly what we're putting our employees into, because they're going to ask me, what are we doing?
Well, the process would be for them to call in.
Yep.
Lumicera will tell them that they need their tax returns.
Okay.
They're going to let them know if it's a prescription that maybe need to be renewed. They may have to call their doctor.
Okay.
And there's a form that they need to sign off on. So all of that's going to be done either via email or Preferably, what we see is members like to mail the tax return rather than do it electronically. They feel that's safer.
Sure.
It's going to be up to them. It can be a secure email, so it's going to be their choice. And once that's in, the Lumicera rep is going to take it from there until it's been approved or not approved, and then get back to the member. So, I mean, we can outline
Okay.
that for you, but that's generally in a nutshell.
Yeah,
Okay, all right. I just want to make sure we're not dumping into something where it's trying to get a rebate on a TV, it takes 6 years.
No.
You know, something crazy,
No.
but.
I think
Okay.
the other thing I'll add here is that, you know, we ultimately have override ability on this. We want to have a very consistent process to what we're willing to override and what we're not willing to override, because we can't make exceptions just because somebody doesn't get their act together.
Yeah.
We can make exceptions for extenuating circumstances. We can, you know, so we have some flexibility. Navitas isn't going to dictate to us what that looks like. So we have a
Right.
little
But Justin mentioned early on that it's to their advantage because they're essentially going to pay nothing. Whereas right now, they could be meeting their deductible with one prescription fill. So, yeah, it makes sense for them to just get into the process and get it approved.
Yeah, if you think about, you know, there could be paying $2,000, $3,000, you know,
Yes.
up front right away.
Easily.
And that can be quite painful. Again, this is another a benefit. It should look like a win-win. But I do want to quick talk about, yeah.
Just to frame, I mean, I should have said this at the front end. This is on as discussion. This is certainly a new concept for all of us. So this was meant to be a trial run, and this conversation is going to make our presentation next month, if you want to see as an action item, that much more refined. So don't be afraid to ask questions, because we're also going to be sharing this with the Superintendent Advisory Council and the meet and confer with the teacher leadership too, just to get questions so we can come back and answer them as well as we can. So.
So let's say I'm on Humira, and let's just pretend we're not even talking about this new process. We just found out that I might be spending $2,000 or $3,000 right up front as a copay if I'm on Humira. What else currently happens? Do I just get that drug automatically, or do I have to call
Yeah, that's a great
Navitas
question.
now, or
So
what are the
that
other?
kinda leads me
What's the
into this.
process that we go through now?
Yep. That leads me to this slide, because the process now, and for any new person prescribed a new drug after this goes live, when your doctor sends it into the pharmacy, there is a pause at the pharmacy for a prior authorization on any specialty medication. They want to make sure that you've tried either other steps or that they've got the correct information from the physician that says this is, you know, truly the right drug and the right course of treatment. So there's always that double check to start with now and again for a new prescription. So once that goes through, you're not going to be able to get it at a local Walgreens. You have to get it through Lumicera. So that script goes to Lumicera, and they would ship it out from the specialty pharmacy from that point to the member's home. So specialty always goes to the member's home. For the new people,
And that wouldn't change if we did this in the future. If we did the new process in the future, that part of the process
that
wouldn't
part
change.
still happens. So on September 1st, if you were to be prescribed that medication, you're not going to be able to get it at the pharmacy. It's going to be that pause, and you're going to have to connect with Lumicera, and so will your physician. The physician will send their prescription there. And so that part will still happen. What then will happen is, now that Lumicera reps got you on the phone, right? So now we're going to talk about how to go through this process of getting the patient assistance and instruct them that you have to go through this to get the next fill. Now, granted, if we can't get all the paperwork in time, we're going to get another gap fill in there. What we're going to try to do is to not have to do these gap fills on the plan, because that's just going to dilute the savings that we're hoping that the district receives by getting people in the program. We know full well that there's going to be over-income people. There just will. And we don't know if a married couple on the plan, you're not going to know a married couple on the plan if they're going to be over-income or not. That's why we want the process to dictate whether, they qualify or not. And but again, if they don't, it goes back on the plan, and they would pay for that like they would do right now.
So really, the difference is the tax return step,
Yeah.
right? because we're calling the same phone number, we're talking to the same people. It's just the extra step of the tax return. And that's part of the reason we're doing this through Navitas as opposed to one of these third-party advocacies, because then you're layering in, a firm that they haven't talked with, they've never heard of. We'd have to change PBMs from Navitas to somebody else. And now you've got two different phone numbers, you've got two different sets of people to call. The streamlined nature of this is a lot easier and a lot easier for people to understand. So really, we're talking about a flip in the tax return or flipping the process to include the tax return. Most everything else is going to be, I can't think of anything else that's actually going to be different, other than we're talking about gap fills instead of the entire year of paying for a drug that could be, $5,000 a fill.
Mrs. Voigt.
Just for clarification, I've never heard of the Lumicera. Is that like a subset of Navitas?
Yeah,
Like,
it's a great question. And you know what? Most of your population wouldn't know Lumicera because unless they have that specialty, they're going to never be introduced to them. But it is actually a Navitas-owned company. So Navitas does, and just being full transparency, Navitas does own their own specialty pharmacy, and that is Lumicera. So we're not talking about your mail or order medications. This is strictly pharmacy or specialty. So again, just to talk about what does this mean for the rest of your population? Well, the good news is that with this program, we don't have to change our PBM. We get to stay with Navitas. And the cost savings that this creates is going to keep the plan design and the contributions the same because there's a significant amount on the table. And the specialty solution is going to reduce the overall drug spend, but not just now, and that's what we talked about before, but all of these future pipeline specialty medications or someone that comes into your district new or develops one of these rare conditions. And now it's not uncommon, by the way, to see a $600,000 a year drug. So, these are the reasons why we're talking about introducing this.
Yeah, so sort of rounding third here, what does this allow us to do? We can provide the highest level of benefit, still being fiscally responsible, right? We're talking about a very small subset of the population driving a significant portion of spend, but we can still get them what they need, just at a cost that is lower to them and cost lower to the district. Again, allows us to keep benefit plan design the same, the contributions the same, and then again, the employee's getting it at no cost or low cost if there is a bit of a cost to it. And then the last part, which Jean mentioned, is vitally important. We know that this is going to keep getting worse. It has gotten worse, year over year over year. I didn't ever envision a point we'd be, here, right, where you could see a $600,000 a year drug on most groups that we interact with. I just never thought that was possible, right? But it could pop up at any time. And, the employees and the members need those prescriptions. So if we can hedge against that from a financial standpoint ongoing, and we continue to provide a strong benefit to the rest of the population as a result, we think that that's a really great place to be and one of fiscal responsibility.
Jeff mentioned in his introduction, and I think it's important to touch on this, in my mind, is a reset of our health insurance costs that we rarely get. It kind of got lost in the shuffle, but we think conservatively we'll save $1 million a year doing this. That's almost 5% of our spend, or what I budget annually for health insurance increases. And normally we have to make plan changes to get down to that 5%. So, ideally, and we'll talk about the IBNR calculation and some other things as we get closer to the end of the fiscal year, it's possible with the with the employee health clinic and this change that, and I don't want to predict health insurance because there's nothing worse to try to do, with little or no premium increase, which helps all of our employees. And if things do go south, this move is stopping us, and as mentioned in that slide, from some of the other things that we've got on our waiting list of things to talk about in terms of increasing deductible and spousal surcharges and other things that would impact everybody. So this is strictly a process change. When I first heard the tax return thing, my first meeting on this, I was wondering why H&I was even bringing it to us, because I thought that was kind of crossing a line, wherever that line is. But when you see the dollars involved, and when you think about the fact that these people are already going through a pretty extensive process to get their medications, is that one extra step worth the savings? And I think the best part about all this, and we've touched on several times, with 41 people only being impacted out of 3,000 and some, the personalized transition can be implemented to help guide people through that. But we will need to be strong in making, if you make an exception to everyone, no one's going to do it. So that's just a recap. But again, there's a reason this is a discussion item, so the more questions, the better for all of us.
And just from my personal perspective in managing Navitus as our pharmacy benefit manager, I get 0 complaints from our staff members. The only inquiries or questions or requests I ever get are, I need a new card, I lost mine. So there's a real advantage to our being able to stay with Navitus, even though the program is new. So the transition should be much smoother for them.
I might be oversimplifying it, but I just kind of see it as if I was in a checkout line at the grocery store or even at a pharmacy, and if there was a coupon that was at home and it was for 10 cents off something that was at $100, I might not bother clipping it out and bringing it in. But if it was $99 off your $100 purchase, I would do that. And then if that wasn't even mostly my money, and the money, if there was a pot of money, because there is, and it's only so big, being an educator, having passion for kids, knowing that most of that money, that 99%, is going to go back into helping kids, then why wouldn't you do it? Someone's handing you that coupon right there. And I know it's a pain to get tax returns ready, and it's just something that we have to do, but every April we have to have it. So if it's on your computer, or if it's something that you have to copy, I mean, that's the pain. So basically, it's like, how can we help you with that? Can we send you a link, like have our, I don't know, is it F&F who would send them a link and say, here's your tax return. So when they contact you, all you have to do is hit send.
We don't want you guys involved in that at all.
Okay, whoever
But
does it,
there
like
could
we
there
get
could be
Connie.
a secure email to Lumicera if someone wanted to do it that way.
Like, how can we make it as easy as possible, where all they need to do is just pass it on? Is all I'm saying.
I think providing them that link, as simple as we can get, and it's pretty easy. I mean, most people have electronic tax returns at this point anyway, so it's not, at least I think so. So I think the process, it's just the transition, the change. You have to get over that learning curve, or whatever you want to call it.
I think Kay mentioned it. We don't get complaints from Navitus. Navitus
From
is
any group.
They are a member-centric organization. And so our years of working with Navitus would tell me that if there's a way to make it easy for the members, if there's a way to make this seamless, they're going to have it. They're going to figure it out. Because that's who they are. That's who they've been for our population here. That's who they've been for other clients of ours. So I'll just throw that out there. I think that they're going to make this as easy as they possibly can for people, because member experience is one of their absolute key drivers.
Yeah, we debated that because there's firms out there who have done it their whole existence, right, for decades or whatever. But I guess my gut feeling always goes back to good companies do things well. And Navitus has never, we've never questioned that move once, I don't think. So I think they're going to be very successful in doing it. So we decided, just for that synergy and, the familiarity our staff has already, it was worth. And they want to be successful, and they want a big client to pull it off as they're rolling out this new service platform. So it could be a win-win.
Yeah, I appreciate Jeff, Gene, and Justin, you guys bringing forth this as a suggestion. It could potentially have a huge immediate impact, but like you had said on that last bullet point, it's hedging all the things that are going to potentially be coming forth. So I really appreciate it. I think we should continue to move in this direction, and I would hope that we would see this as an action item this next month, Mr. Chairman.
Alrighty. Anything else? Any other questions? Alrighty. Thank you very much for your time. Fantastic.
Thank you.
Presentation.
Thank you, everybody. I bet you never thought when you ran for school board you'd be diving into specialty drugs and all the nuances of healthcare, right?
Alrighty. Next up on our discussion information items is the budget development federal funding update.
Mr. Chairman, do you mind if we go to the substitute teacher report?
No, that's fine.
Sharon's waiting in
Oh,
her
okay.
office.
Oh, for sure.
Just allow her to go home a little quicker.
Yep. Let's
You
jump
guys
in.
are all right with that?
For sure. You text her?
Yeah. Or if you just want to knock on her door,
Oh, she in there?
I think.
Welcome.
Hi.
Hi. Alrighty, so next up is the substitute teacher report.
So Sharon and I, per our discussion here last month, we thought we'd just both come here, and then Sharon will also, this is agendized on the HR committee as well, just kind of go over where we are, some comparison data, and some general thoughts, and then answer any questions you think we might have. So Sharon, I don't know if you want to start off, or you want me to give you a second?
I'll try this one. Okay. So I just have some general information and facts I thought I would share, and this will be basically the same report that I'll have with HR. So there's been some question about substitutes and how we're doing. So we have hired nearly 70 substitutes since the beginning of the school year. So I know that there is a concern, there is a shortage, of course, but it's not that we are not recruiting and hiring. So we've had almost 70 start. Right now we have 132 working subs, meaning they've worked so far this school year. Now comparatively, last year at this time, we had 224 working subs. So we have fewer in the actively working pool. And then another fact that I don't know that people realize is the year to date, we actually have a greater need for substitute teachers last year than we do this year. So, meaning, if you look day to day, we have more absences last year, like on a Tuesday, March 2nd, than, well, March is a bad month, but than this year. So, I mean, there's several theories as to why that may be, but everyone thinks because of quarantines and because of COVID, we have so many more absences. But in fact, we don't. Almost on a daily basis, we're coming in under where we were last year. So, additionally, I know with this shortage, you know that we have teachers cover for teachers, so they would have to pick up and substitute for other teachers. And we recently did a survey, and we asked the question, how many times in December did you cover for a colleague? So just put this information out there for teachers. 43% said 0 times, and 45% said 1 to 5 times. So we're almost at 90% covered for a colleague in the month of December is where we pulled this from. And then we do have a handful. 7% said 6 to 10 times, and then over 10 times was 3%. So while I think there is a perception that we're constantly asking people to cover, are we? Yes, we are, but I just wanted to put some numbers out that almost 90% of them have only covered 5 or fewer times in the month of December. And then I also wanted to talk a minute about our fill rates. I believe there's a dashboard that everyone has access to, and we are reporting out on total fill rates. But I did want to highlight the teacher fill rates. And I want to also be clear that the need for substitutes, I was speaking about teachers. I didn't pull in the teachers and the aides, just to be clear, for the number of substitute requests last year versus this year to date. Oh, I can try. I'll move this closer. Yeah, so I just wanted to say that the year-to-date statistics was teacher statistics, not teacher and assistants. And for sub-fill rate for teachers, even though our district rate is constantly in the red, we are in the 80s almost regularly for teachers. And we've been up in the 90s. In January, we were in the 90s for covered classes, percentage filled. So when we do the entire pool for that average, it brings it way down, because for our assistants, for example, if I have 8 out and only 1 gets filled, it completely throws our percentages. And then I wanted to highlight, let's see. Well, then if we're talking about compensation, I have information of about 45 districts on a sheet, of which, and most of them updated it, but about 12 gave an increase this year, 2 subs. And right now, according to that sheet, 15 districts pay more than SDW. 6 pay the same, and then 24 are lower than us, as we're looking at comps in general for subs.
People who are paying more, it's only $5 or $10. I mean, that might be a lot of money to some people, but $5 or $10 per day more. It's not like we're $40 behind or
Right.
25 or whatever.
Right. And that's all specifically I prepared this evening for you.
Como.
Sharon, remind me, I thought we, from a management perspective, I appreciate you sharing the data. From managing our subs, do we hire a firm to do that and to take care of all that? We used to, but
I don't know.
So like when we need a sub, we used to call out and say, hey, who's available? But then for a while there, we had a firm do that, actually manage the process of finding subs for us.
Like teachers on call?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we shut that down.
We tried to bring teachers on call in 5 years ago.
Yeah.
Prior to that, we had a phone system. Maybe that's what you're talking. I can't think of the name of that now. That did like auto calls and things like that. That might be what you're talking about, Joe. But I'm not aware of us ever having
No,
a service.
Teachers on call, the board said no.
Oh,
Okay.
ASAP. That's what
Yeah,
it is.
ASOP is what the
Oh, Frontline.
phone tree was called. It was like a phone tree. One would call and you'd keep calling until you got somebody that would take the shift.
Yeah.
That was managed by the district, right?
Yeah, it was a service. They were still our employees.
Yes.
You know, but the people signed
Yeah.
up through and
Yep.
teachers requested through ACE, or Frontline, sorry, too. So it was it was just an interchange of data. It wasn't.
And we would have a sub-caller that would start very early in the morning to start the process. So the district
Yep.
has managed that.
Okay. And then from a recruiting perspective, do we use a recruiting firm to help recruit substitute teachers, or are we doing that all on our own?
We do that on our own.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
We can always use more subs, just like we can always use more. So if anyone's watching and knows anybody, go to our website because we have a live and active posting.
Should have had a thing to shoot up on the
I
screen.
know.
while
They
we
should.
were talking about it.
Right?
So, and you can check our social media as well. Mary Jo, every once in a while, will push out a posting as well.
Okay. Oh, Mrs. Voigt.
Mentioned that you've hired 70 subs this year. What would be the main kind of pool that you're drawing from at this point? Is it like college students? Is it, retired educators? Is it stay-at-home moms? What would you say would be the market that might be potentially interested in becoming a sub?
I'd have to ask Esther, who we've pulled in this year. Esther Mold is our substitute coordinator, so I didn't ask for demographics of our hires, but I definitely can do so.
Right, anything else? Yes, Mrs. Voigt.
You talked about the salary range, and we have 6 at the same as us, 15 more, 24 less. Have we given the raise this year? Or no?
We have not.
We have
Ours
not.
haven't had a raise, no.
Mr. Como.
Is our rate $120 a day? That's what I thought I remembered, but I might be wrong on that.
We're 115 for our daily rate. And then if they are with us in a shorter long-term assignment, it's 130. And if it's a longer long-term assignment, which is 61 days or more, it's 170.
Okay.
All right, any other questions? All right. Thank you much, Sharon.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sharon.
Bye. All righty. So now next up on the discussion information items is the budget development. Federal funding update.
I should just leave it on. It's a sign I talk too much, apparently. We put budget development, we always have it on the agenda pretty much every month through spring, but this time I wanted Sherry to walk you through the funding, the federal funding that we have as of today, and there's talk of another stimulus bill, and I hear about schools, but I have no idea what that would be. But I wanted to first share what I think our strategy is going to be, and I don't believe we've shared this before. Ideally, once we have identified all the sources of money that is coming, that we would claim those dollars as fast as we can. And there's a lot of eligible expenditures out there. The ESSER 2 that just came out, there's a lot of latitude, much more than was in ESSER 1, that we can start claiming costs. So why would we do that is to build in flexibility in our regular operational budget, our local dollars. And we might have, based on the timing of all these federal funds, we might have some very balance sheet-wise, good-looking years or year. If all those dollars hit in one fiscal year, it's just the timing of it. We can't control that. But what I want to do is set aside local dollars so when these one-time monies do disappear, and they always do with federal dollars, that cliff, we have resources set aside to address it, or at least help address it. So hopefully that makes sense. Spend the federal dollars first, save local, and then utilize the local under our timeline, under our priorities, and not be tied to some grant or ESSER funds timelines, and then we're scrambling, and then I don't think you make the best decisions. This gives us some time to map that all out. So that's the gist of it. I'll bring up the handout so you guys can see it. It's in docs, so you can.
Start talking to
Yeah,
you
if
while
you
you're
wanna.
pulling it up. So the document is broken out into two different segments. One is more grant-based and one is more
rebate money based. And so let's start on the top segment, which is the grant based. There were 4 big buckets available this year. 2 we know we have, 2 are, 1 we know we don't have, and 1 is uncertain. So let's start with FEMA. Schools were supposed to be able to apply for funds for FEMA for things like PPEs and anything we needed to use, cleaning supplies, things we needed to do to mitigate the COVID impact to our districts. A little unclear on what was acceptable and what wasn't. So we went ahead and we submitted a claim in early December for over $700,000. Plus we put in a budget for another $200 and some thousand to bring it up to about $1 million through FEMA. We've gotten through the initial review stage, but then they don't give us any timeline to know when or if they'll approve our claim. So in the meantime, we have our ESSER funds, which is our ESSER Round 1, which is part of the CARES Act, and we're holding off claiming that because a lot of that we've already put into FEMA, and we obviously can't double dip and claim through both parties. So until we know more about the FEMA, some of this is a little bit up in the air. The new administration in the White House said they're going to provide more FEMA funds available to school districts. But on the same token, we know a local district that got declined for all of their FEMA funds. So it's really up in the air. We're trying our best to get money from FEMA, and in theory, once you're approved, you can continue to put in ongoing expenses above and beyond what we've already put in for, but it's a matter of knowing what's going to be allowable and what's not. Questions on FEMA? Okay. Well, I'm going to move to ESSER. The first round of ESSER money we got, and that was spendable from going back to last March, and it'll be through September of 2022. We got $1.2 million of that. There, the footnote is that includes $59,000 of that is going to private schools for equitable participation. That amount was determined based on their Title I low-income populations at their schools. That's how that was determined. There was a lawsuit pending for a long time to give them it based on their entire population and not just their low income. That lawsuit was declined. I don't know the right term, but it was shot down, and so it went with the low income. Our first round of ESSER claims were due in January, which we put one in, but we've gotten feedback from DPI that the claiming is pretty low all around, which we assume is because everybody's waiting on FEMA before we can submit our total expenditures. But some of the concern with that is that if we're not spending the money, that we don't need the money. So with this new round of ESSER, which we'll start utilizing in March, and that it's open from March of 2021 through September 30th of 2023, like Darren had indicated, our goal is to just start using it. It's a little more open as far as what it can be used for than the first round of ESSER. At least that's the initial. Everything's still being finalized, but the initial thought and what they've proposed is a lot more open-ended and what we can spend it on to help offset other losses. So our goal is to claim as much of that as we can this year, keep our fund balance building with the costs that we're offsetting with this. But again, right now it's in the joint, everything is in the Joint Finance Committee pending approval. So we should know more on that shortly. But it's a large chunk of money. $4.8 million is a nice amount to have for this year. Questions on ESSER at all at this point, other than what it stands for? Because I still can't answer that. It's Education Stabilization. I remember the first two.
It's actually elementary and secondary school emergency relief.
That's totally off. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Year funding.
So we're waiting on FEMA. So we're holding back on some of the expenses in ESSER 1 because.
Claimed what we feel we can that we know FEMA's not going to cover, but.
Yep. So, and we don't know when FEMA's going to get back to us. And you had mentioned something like, well, but we run the risk that, if we're not claiming more on the ESSER 1 funds, we may never get that back. So we may apply for that $1 million from FEMA, not hear from them, and the ESSER round 1 could finish on September 30th of 2022, and we may never have a chance to recover that $1 million
Well,
if FEMA denies that and they don't get back to us in a timely manner. Is that correct? That's a risk that we're taking?
I wouldn't say that we won't recoup that money. So what we're doing is kind of switching gears on how we're using that money. Originally, we had in the plan a lot of all the PPEs and all that sort of thing. Now we're looking more at staffing, substitutes, things that that FEMA wouldn't cover. FEMA won't cover personnel. So we're really evaluating the difference between the two and what we think we can spend it on, and trying to utilize ESSER 1 in a different way than we originally thought, so that we still can utilize that money. We're just switching gears. So technology is another item that, FEMA will not cover. So any technology-based things, we're going back and looking at all of the purchases that we've made to see what we can claim through ESSER. So I wouldn't say that we're going to lose that money. We're shifting how we're paying for it. If FEMA comes back and says no deal, then yes, we have those expenditures that we've paid for, but we've offset them with other expenditures that we had.
Yeah, I think the
My,
bigger.
my concern is we said to FEMA, we're turning in these expenses, and we don't have those expenses covered under any ESSER because we don't want to double dip. So there is a chance that FEMA can turn us down, or they run out the clock on ESSER round 1. Is that correct?
It's possible.
Okay. So I guess I'm just trying to weigh the risk of double dipping and then giving back to one or the other. See what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So and I'm not advocating for that, but how do we hedge the risk of FEMA just not getting back to us?
I think we've spent so much in COVID-related costs that in the timeline that ESSER round 1 goes to, we would still be able to claim those dollars. And if we can get to ESSER 2, the language, at least what we've read, is so broad, it's really budget stabilization is what it ends up being in my mind, but it just takes them a lot longer to say it. So I think it is a risk. I think what the impact of FEMA's delay is the timing of our ability to claim it in a timely basis, those expenditures. I think it'll just draw it out further, but I think we'll get to, even if FEMA ends up giving us the $1 million, we can easily burn through with what we've spent on COVID-related things. Agree with me I think we'll also be able to capture that 1.2, and then once we get to ESSER 2, becomes so broad in the timeline. Again, they at least gave us a couple of years to burn through these dollars.
So ESSER 2 is kind of essentially our plan B if FEMA comes back and doesn't give us what we think.
Not necessarily because of the spending timeline. So we can't start spending ESSER 2 until March of this year. So
Okay.
any expenditures prior to that are not going to be eligible to be claimed under ESSER 2. So the way we need to look at it more is we have an amount of spending we had to do this year for technology, there's staffing, there's cleaning PPE. Our original goal with ESSER was let's cover PPEs, all those additional things. Yes, excuse me. And then, a little bit of technology, a little bit of the staffing, but the bottom line of what we spend doesn't change, right? It's just where the bucket is. The amount that would have gone to FEMA would have just come out of fund balance or our budget. Not necessarily out of fund balance, but out of our budget. So it's just a bonus if we get the FEMA money, but we're rearranging so that we don't lose the ESSER money in the meantime.
Yeah.
That makes sense? So the bottom line of what we're spending isn't any different. The difference is is some of this going to be offset by FEMA, or is some of it going to come out of our budget,
Yep.
our overall?
Yep, and I'm not putting my hopes on FEMA, is what I'm saying.
Oh, I
So,
wouldn't.
You know,
I mean, it's
and
not
that's $1
like,
million. I mean, $1 million is a lot. Yeah, it comes out of fund balance. Yep, we pay, our taxpayers pay for that. Yep.
it's not like,
You know, we pay for it in either way. It's whether it's through federal funds or
Right.
local and state, so.
it's not like FEMA and school districts have this long history of working together.
Right,
This is a
right.
whole new avenue for them too, probably. They're probably on the learning curve as well, but
And it seems like they were overwhelmed with the amount of money people claimed.
I'm trying to figure out how well prepared I need to hear that the FEMA dollars won't go through and that's coming out of our fund balance. So I'm not putting a lot of weight, I guess, on the federal government coming
I
through.
think we plan hard for not getting the FEMA, and if we get it,
So as we project our budgets going forward, we need to be absolutely sure that we understand that this is just this is a bonus if we get this. It's not something we should count on.
and for people watching at home, bonus is probably the wrong word. We've incurred the costs.
Right.
It's just a reimbursement.
Yeah, that wasn't a good choice of words on
And
my
I used
part.
it too,
Yes.
so, but.
Reimbursement for something that has been spent.
Yep.
Yep.
So the only question I have is, so ESSER round one, it goes from March 13th, 2020 through September 30th, 2022. We just have to spend that money during that period, right? We could actually get the, right? It's just during that period. That money doesn't run out on September 30th, 2022. It's just, we have to have our expenditures into them.
You have to have cut the check.
You have to have cut the check by then,
Right.
right? So if FEMA says, before September 30th, 2022, it's a no-go, we're going to try to get the money from the ESSER one, right?
We're also switching gears a little bit on what we were originally looking at for us.
So the other question I have, right, so the other question I have is, can we submit those, say that FEMA says on October 30th it's a no-go, can we submit our expenditures that we occurred before September 30th to ESSER one?
Generally, there's about a 30-day, 30
Right.
to 60, depending on that you can claim after.
That
the
you can
20.
claim after, right? So FEMA, chances are, if FEMA's gonna let us know before then, we'll be able to claim that money.
I would think we
If
would
there's
know.
some left to claim on ESSER one. Because we do have that period. We can, as long as we cut those checks or we incur those expenses during
Actually,
that period of
it's to
time, we can
inform-
claim that.
It's no different than a grant we have now.
Right,
I mean, it's the same process. The dollars are just significantly larger.
yes,
No
okay.
different than Title I or flow through or anything else. The process for us in the books is the same. What FEMA will do in my mind is it'll allow us to maybe have ESSER help us in more fiscal years,
Right,
right?
Yep.
Whether we flip that into fund balance
yes,
or not, but it's just a matter of how far we can stretch the dollars. So-
right, okay.
So,
And one more note on ESSER too that I forgot to mention. GPI is still working on how is that going to be provided to us? Is it like all up front right away, or is it going to be doled out over the next 3 fiscal years? And this chunk this year, spend it all the way along. As far as you can spend your first chunk and leave some of it to the next year and get your next chunk. The Gears Fund, that was the government, the governor's pot that they got to decide who it went to, and we didn't get any. Called rebates, current funding increases. And the first one is the unemployment compensation return. This we're sitting at right now about $955,000 that we should be getting back in unemployment compensation, but the only response from the Department of Workforce Development is it could be months and months. They don't know when we'll get it. We've already spent this money. It's on the books. It would be, we are definitely supposed to get it back, 50% coming from the federal government and 50% coming from the state. But it's going to feed through the state, is my understanding. So the federal government will give it to the state, and then the state will feed it back to us when all of this. But they're still calculating claims from COVID. So they have a lot on their plate right now, and this is not one of their priority items.
FEMA might beat them.
Yeah, I don't have a lot of faith in this one,
Saying.
getting our money.
This is another one that Sherry keeps reassuring me that we're getting, and I think she's right, but
When?
I'm waiting for the check.
When they can't say, but we have talked to them and they have assured us, yes, you're going to get it. It's just a matter of we have
Yep.
no idea when that will
That
happen.
is-
So
that-
it might be next fiscal year before
Yeah.
we,
That's been their line, though.
not a guarantee that that's coming back to us this fiscal year.
That's been their line for 11 months, though. It's coming.
And,
We'll get around to you.
The good news is half of this was spent in last fiscal year, so it's already off the books and paid for and out of the budget. The other half was from the summer of this year.
Yeah, this is the perfect example why our fiscal year ends might look, we might get reimbursed for something that happened last year, and, it's just going to be kind of this weird couple of years, I think.
I agree. And the time to utilize that ran out on December 26th, so it isn't that they're going to be adding any more to it moving forward
Right.
here. The amount is done, it's just a matter of. One smaller amount, but Social Security tax rebate. With the IRS, we get to, on certain types of COVID leave that we give our employees, we get to skip the employer portion of the Social Security tax, or we get it rebated to us. So when payroll goes, they do the whole payroll tax, and then when I do my quarterly report, I calculate how much out is what we get back, and then we file a claim with the IRS and with the quarterly report. Right now, we're sitting at $26,784, and we have one more quarter. This program goes through March 31st, and so we will have one more quarter to claim, and most of that was this last quarter, so I would envision this would get up to a little over $50,000, given on that. This one is kind of an interesting one. We're trying to look at, we are operating under the summer food service program versus the National School Lunch and National School Breakfast program. Reimbursement rates for those are higher than what the reimbursement rate is. So the summer food program reimbursement rate per meal is higher than the National School Lunch Program and Breakfast Program. And to look at the number of meals we've served this year and what our rebate would have been with the National School Lunch Program versus what we're operating under. So this is $428,000 that we're getting. Our cost at this point in time is not any higher per meal. We'll be talking about that maybe next month a little bit to see if there's changes there, but that'll be on the agenda for next month. Because and they've just increased it in January, and that's intended to offset the cost of COVID. Well, because we are a set per meal contract company, Aramark charges us the same meal no matter what, the same price no matter what. So they're the ones that are getting the increased cost on their end, and we have no increased cost on our end. But again, we'll talk about that. This isn't to compare how much we would have had last year to this year, because we have less meals this year than we had last year. But it's just to say, if we were comparing apples to apples and say, for the number of meals we're currently serving, which program we're in, this is a bit of an increase that we're able to operate the summer food service program. Does that make sense? And this is the difference of cost of the meal and the two different reimbursement rates times the number of meals that we've served.
This started out as a kind of an ESSER agenda item, but we thought we might as well list all the things. I think this is all of them.
Well,
At least the big ones, or bigger ones.
Interestingly enough, I had two more little ones today, though. I mean, it's just things keep coming out of the woodwork. United Healthcare is going to give us $10,000 for PPEs. All we have to do is send in a receipt, and so every little bit counts. And then this is a little bit different, another food service one. We run the fresh fruit and vegetable program, and we apply for 4 different schools, usually based on their free and reduced percentages. but the pot of money runs out before we hit Hawthorne every year. Well, several people have dropped out of the program, and we got notification that if we want to start serving fresh fruit and vegetables at Hawthorne, we have $11,000 to do so for the end of the year. Again, it's a nice bonus for us because of other people dropping out because of COVID and the way they're serving. So Hawthorne is excited to start that program. So all these little things are going to continue to pop up also. These are the main ones.
I'm sorry, go ahead, Joe.
It just, so who decided, maybe it was a federal, maybe it was a state entity, maybe it was us, that we should be in the summer food service program and not the national school lunch at this time?
So what happened is the first week of school, it was the National School Lunch Program and breakfast program. Then the USDA came out and decided, we're going to allow you to continue to operate under the summer food service program. And in doing that, you get to provide free lunches and breakfasts to all of your students in all of your schools. So it was a win-win for our families. They didn't have to pay for meals. And so we went ahead and said, yep, we started that the second week of school.
So was it our choice to do that?
It is our choice. We
Okay.
could have continued with the normal program and then people paying for it. Felt it was a wise enough, a nice enough thing for our families to allow that.
So the federal government gave us the option and we chose it?
Correct.
Okay.
That runs through June 30th technically, but we're looking at ending on June 9th, last day of school this year. We'll have to see what the world looks like. We have the opportunity to continue. Summer school starts, or the projected summer school dates are starting in June, and we'd like to hopefully be able to go back to the normal summer food service program, which is only at the sites of summer school versus having this open wide, everybody in the community come get food. And we don't want to do that in the middle of summer school switch, so we'd like to end this program on when school ends, start up our normal summer food program.
So all this sounds great, and I'll tell you my concern on the flip side of this. If I'm a legislator in Madison, I'm getting ready to vote on a state biennial budget, and I'm reading that the school district of Waukesha is going to get $1 million from FEMA, 1.2 from round one ESSER, 4.8 from round two ESSER, yada, yada, yada.
Yep.
Why do I need increased sustained funding? So some of my peers are really into the political side of this. They love the lobby and all that. That's not my thing. I told them we should be lobbying our federal legislators to not give us another stimulus and to give us local ongoing dollars to help us, because the more we get from the feds, my concern is Madison's going to solve all their problems off this sheet right here, times 426 school districts or whatever number is left. So I can't prove that is going to happen, but if I'm a legislator, I'm sure thinking it. So.
So, and we are just looking at revenues. So we have these expenses. We've spent the money already. We've spent additional, we've had some expenses we've never run into before due to COVID. We're keeping track of that. So how do we make sure our legislators understand that side of the coin?
And we do.
That side of the ledger.
And DPI actually required us, I forget what law that was under, to submit a cost estimate of our COVID related. So everyone has submitted this. God, this is going way back to early fall. Yeah. So those costs have been, but.
At least through a certain point in time, we still have more that are ongoing.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
The need is there.
It's a snapshot.
The need is there. I just think the opportunity is there for them.
Gotcha.
So.
There's a lot of people, a lot of districts out there that are telling their story and documenting the impact. And I was at a seminar on a virtual WebEx on Friday morning that talked all about being able to make sure templates on how you could do that. So it's something I'd like to look at creating.
But, and gossip's cheap, I guess. But ESSER 3, you're hearing twice what we got in ESSER 2. You're hearing 3 times. At that point, I don't know. We didn't spend that much on COVID, I wouldn't say. If it's budget stabilization, that's fine, but we didn't spend $10 million in plexiglass.
Right.
So it'll be interesting to see. Again, I'd rather have $200 on the revenue limit every year for the next 5 years than another stimulus package, but that's my take on it.
Any other questions?
Hopefully this is helpful. A lot of
Yeah,
a lot of
for
moving
sure,
parts.
definitely. Alrighty. The last item on the discussion information section is the monthly budget report.
Okay. I'm going to first hit a little bit on our local sources because it was kind of an interesting observation for me. We received our first tax payments in January, totaling $44 million, of which 40 rest went into Fund 41. But the interesting thing about it was every year, from year to year, our tax collection percentages run pretty consistent in each month. And this year we were down which, you know, it doesn't sound like a lot, but when you multiply that 3% out against our tax levy, that's $2.6 million that came in less in January than we anticipated. This is a prime example of why you want to have a good fund balance, right? Because we can absorb this and wait on this tax collection and not have a huge impact and need to short-term borrow or anything. Because it is a chunk of change that we would normally have expected to get this time of year. It does impact our interest because it's less interest we're earning on our tax money right now, but interest is pretty, so it's not, for this year, a huge hit. My only thought on why this happened is COVID, that people are holding off and gonna, you know, maybe we'll see a higher percentage come February, what I would hope. The good news is that our biggest tax base, which is the city of Waukesha, was only down a small amount, less than a full percent. So that's good because that's our largest chunk. But it was interesting to see some of them, I highlighted on here what some of them were pretty substantial. Like the town of Brookfield was down 12.6%. Village of Waukesha was down 11.10%. And town of Genesee was 7.5%. Only one municipality, the city of Brookfield, had an increase. That was a 5% increase. City of Pewaukee, which is our second largest base, had a relatively small, less than 2% increase. So that's good news, and that those two are our two highest are the lowest drops. Questions on that in particular? On your tax sheets, how much was collected and what the differences were from year to year. But that was our main local source of revenue in January. And again, we'll see our collections again in February. City of Waukesha, we get monthly, so. As far as the interdistrict sources, we just had more e-achieve part-time open enrollment payments. State sources was our transportation aid. Our this year's payment was $121,000. The drop from the prior year was due to declining enrollment and not an impact of COVID from last year. Just the way that report is calculated and how we count the number of students. They don't have to be there every single day, so the March did not hurt that this past year. This year, we have less ridership, it seems, and with the could impact it more this year. One of those that you get your aid based on your prior year's expenditures. Federal sources, we received grant payments for Title III and Title IV in January. Overall, we've received 42.5% of our budgeted revenues, which is just a bit lower than last year at this time, mainly from the taxes. Expenditures, salaries and benefits are looking very good. We're at 45.4% of our salary budget spent. We've have all of our Increases in retro in, we've done our January salary projections, and we're very comfortable that we're right on target with where we should be with both salaries and benefits. So that's good news. Purchase services, it's looking very low, but we do have quite a few bus bills that came in late that are significant amounts of money, so I suspect that this is going to catch up quite a bit next month when we get those bills taken care of. Our largest spending for this month is our tuition payments, which include the Montessori for all grades and then the 4K partners that we pay tuition on. And also for the early college credit program payment. Non-capital objects, this is the one we need to really watch closely for COVID, but now with the ESSER funds, we've been talking all along that we might need to come back with a budget adjustment to take care of this, but thinking we're not going to necessarily need that this year with this additional funding sitting out there, that we're not going to be coming back and asking to, it's slowing down a bit, the amount that we've been spending on these items, so that's a good thing. Capital objects, main spending was for technology hardware, mostly those MacBook Airs that we talked about for staff, but that's part of the normal technology rotation. Debt retirement, no general fund debt retirement. Insurance, we had our quarterly insurance payment with one left. We're on target with our budget for our insurance and judgments, and unemployment has dropped off to a minimum, bare minimum. Transfers in January and minimal amounts in other objects. So overall, we're at 37.61% of our approved budget, and at this time last year, we're at 39.63. So even though early on in the year I said we can't do a lot of comparing, it's really starting to level off now, and but can do a little bit better comparisons. Questions on Fund 10? Okay, Fund 27, revenue, we received another categorical aid payment of a little over $1 million. We received our IDEA grant payments totaling almost $600,000 and some Medicaid payments. Salary and benefits, same as with Fund 10. We're right on target with where we need to be at this time of year. Purchase services, our main expenditure was our tuition to private schools and a payment on our CISA contract. But again, our transportation is lagging, but we'll be caught up next month, which these with. Really not much to speak of in non-capital, just supplies, no capital purchases, no insurance costs for January, because the only back to Fund 27 is unemployment. Transfers, you'll start to see something now. There's an $1,800 transfer to Fund 10 out of Fund 27. And this year we started recouping some indirect costs out of our grants. So there's in your grants, you can charge an indirect cost, which is to help cover the administration of the grant. And you don't have to have the outward expense. It just calculates a percentage of the claims that you've done. We haven't done a lot of indirect recovery in the past, but we chose to do it this year because a lot of these grants are carrying over some large sums of money, and we felt it would help with the budget to be able to cost. But when you have an indirect cost in Fund 27, that money has to go back to Fund 10. And so as we get our claims and collect and have indirect cost on them, we'll be doing. And then overall, we really are where we expect to be. We don't have any surprises coming in Fund 27. It's not seemingly as impacted directly by COVID, our special education fund, which is good. Fund 43, interest, we had a CD mature that yielded $64,000. So we're running down the last of our CDs through June, and we're lucky because we've got some pretty good interest rates on those. But as they mature, we're spending it on the projects, so timing is good. And our main expenditures, as always, were for our construction projects, and we spent $2.2 million. Questions?
Nope.
I'm sorry, the self-funded insurance.
Yep.
Let's touch on that a minute. We already touched on taxes. The dental is starting to show some, but not much. It's getting more stable. For the dental, the big one is the health insurance. We increased again by another $300,000, our balance. And I is looked at some projections for the rest of the year, and they do definitely expect to see an increase in claims through June. So I don't think we're going to end up quite as high as we're at right now, but we still should have a substantial balance at the year end. That's all going into the same conversations that Darren's having right now on plan, design, and money, and, you know, our choices are basically pretty limited on what we can do with that money. We can put it back into our claims reserve, our claims fund balance, and designate it for future claims payments to help offset the cost of the plan moving forward, or you can return it to employees. Outside of this year of claims, it would be ill-advised, in my opinion, to do any. But that's all conversations that's happening. We're keeping an eye on it, but H&I thinks that the projections show that it's going to. That surplus should drop.
Alrighty, excellent. Thank you very much. Next up is recommendation for future committee meetings. Does anybody have a recommendation for a future committee meeting? Feel free to email Darren or myself if you do. Alrighty, so we need to adjourn to executive session. Yeah, so I'll be looking for a motion. Anybody who wants to make it? Come on, Teal.
All right. I'll move to adjourn to executive session pursuant to WISTAT 19.85 sub 1E for deliberating or negotiating the purchasing of public properties, the investing of public funds, or conducting other specified public business whenever competitive or bargaining reasons require a closed session. Parentheses, Oakdale Property, Tax Keys, WAKC 1360198, WAKC 137700202, and WAKC 1377003. Employee Health Clinic Contract, Montessori Agreement, Sale of District Property, Blair, Tax Keys, WAKC 1306230, and WAKC 1306232.
Is there a second?
A second.
Voigt. Roll call vote.
Aye.
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 Aye.